First question I saw basically boils down to, say you're on a day 2 with a girl and it doesn't look like it's on for sex. It doesn't look like sex is going to happen that night. What do? Do you try and take her back to your place anyway? Do you try and chill it out? That sort of thing. And this is a really interesting question for me. First of all, I don't know how appropriate it is for me to answer it at this particular point in my learning curve, because in the past I used to always do day 2, day 3, day 4 type dates. Or date, multiple dates in order to sleep with a girl. Whereas nowadays it seems like I sleep with a girl on the first night almost all the time, and then the others are much less common. However, I have been noticing lately that there are certain girls that I am doing multiple dates with, or that it is taking a little bit longer. So in those cases, here's what I've noticed, and here's what makes sense based on pickup theory as well. Essentially, when I look at getting a girl back to your place, last minute resistance, having sex with a girl, that sort of thing, there's one very critical period, or one sort of a very critical distinction that I like to make, and that is this distinction I call the point of no return. The point of no return to me is the point where you've pushed too far or you've come too close, and if the girl were to see you again, she would definitely think that it's for sex. Okay, now if that's the case, then it's actually going to be harder for you to see her again. So the major premise, the major idea here is that you don't want to cross that point of no return unless you think there's a very high probability that she'll actually sleep with you. So that applies on a pulling her home that night, or it applies when you already have her back in your place, in the sense that you don't want to get too physical too quickly if you're not going to go all the way. You don't want to get to that point where you're making out, getting really hardcore, and then it can't go all the way, because then, she's going to feel uncomfortable. It also can apply in certain cases to getting back to your house, in the sense that if you are back at your house, or if it's a hassle getting her back to your house, if it's difficult getting back to your house, then, and you have to push for it, and you push and she's uncomfortable, then she might not be really as willing to see you again. And I think that's really the key distinction, what I just said, that if you end up pushing and then she says no, that's where it really breaks down. As long as she's chasing, as long as she's an active participant, and as long as she's willing and even like participatory in what's going on, I think you're fine. But the question is, when you start pushing for escalation, when you start becoming a pushy guy, that's when you run into issues. Another similar situation is, say, when I'm traveling, and there's a girl that's really on to see me, and I know if I played proper phone game, I could get her out on a date, but I have to play a very quick phone game. I have to get her out the next day. And so I'm urgent, I'm a little pushy, and a lot of times it'll turn them off. So I think that's where you really can go wrong, is when you start becoming too pushy. As long as you're a chilled back guy and you don't seem to care about the outcome, you're not pushing too hard to get somewhere, you're just enjoying the process, I think you're fine. And so I think that's the critical distinction to get in mind. It's not so much about, do you come back to your place or do you not, or do you push or do you not, do you escalate or do you not? The question is, where's it coming from, and are you being pushy, or are you still having fun and enjoying the process? As long as you're enjoying the process, and as long as you're patient, you're fine, okay? Critically, when I'm escalating with a girl, when I'm moving forward with a girl over the course of a relationship, one of the key things I try and keep in mind is patience. No matter how slowly it's going, I'm okay with it, as long as it's still going forward. And again, this is a mistake I've made many, many times. I still make it to this day, which is I get a little too pushy in certain circumstances, especially when I'm time constrained. That's my big thing. If I had an ultimate time, if I actually lived in cities where I'm meeting the girls, that's not a problem. But because of the time constraint, because I don't have time to see them, a lot of times I will be pushy and I will fuck it up. So that's the mistake you really want to avoid. I don't think it's necessarily about that there's a particular logistic that's right, or there's a particular escalation that's right, but I do think that you need to maintain that frame of the cool, aloof guy who is having his own fun, and as soon as you get too pushy, that's when girls start to get turned off, and that's when a girl won't want to see you for day 3, day 4, etc. Next question. Is there a difference between big city game and small town game? The answer is yes and no. Okay. First of all, game is game is game. The qualities that make you an attractive man are the same qualities universally. They're the qualities we evolved with. They're the qualities that would have gotten our ancestors laid. They're the qualities of abundance, of assertiveness, of dominance, of leadership, those sort of things. And so that's always going to be, of knowing the dance of escalation is another one. Those are always going to be very critical sort of points in any sort of game that you're going to be involved with. So that's always going to be standard. As long as the city is big enough that you don't know literally everybody, there's going to be some level of cold approach and some level of meeting strangers involved. So that's always going to be a constant as well. However, the biggest difference between like big city and small town game is, I would say, the existence or the emergence of social circles. And by the way, this can actually apply, the small town game can actually apply within a big city as well, in the sense that there are sort of cliques and social circles that exist. Okay? Now, whenever I talk about social circle game versus cold approach game, the distinction I make is this. Am I going to see the girl again without closing her? If I'm going to see her again and again, like she's a friend of a friend or I'm going to bump into her, then I will be much less pushy in terms of opening in awkward situations. I will also be much less pushy in terms of closing necessarily if it's awkward. Again, if it's on, close. If it's easy, open, obviously. Start the conversation, get it going. Don't let this be an excuse for you not to approach or an excuse for you not to close, to not to show intent, not to be a man. What I'm basically saying is this. Social circle has inherent advantages over cold approach. Okay? When you're going to see someone again and again, you have time to build rapport and comfort. You have time to let them see you be excellent and then have you go away and have them miss you. You have time to, or say if they're walking away from you, you don't have to be desperate and needy and get them back right away. You can take your time and bump into them later. So you have all these natural inherent advantages where you don't have to give away your power. So if you have that available to you, obviously use it. Don't turn a social circle situation into a cold approach situation, because then you're turning something good into something mediocre. However, that said, there are certain girls you're not going to see again, and you have to cold approach them, you have to close them. Okay, so that's where I make the distinction. Okay, game is game. Everything that occurs between the open and the close is just being a cool, natural, dominant guy who knows how to get laid, who has experience with girls, etc. But it's the open and the close where you really, where you're actually doing cold approach, where you're actually doing something that's a little socially unnatural. Okay, and much as we like to tell ourselves cold approach is normal, and it is for us, and it's fine, it's not exactly the social norm. So as much as you can stay within that, it's easier to stay within that. I always say, like, you can always swim upstream, but it's easier to swim with the current. So why turn a social circle situation into a cold approach situation? Now, one other quick thing. This isn't related to social circle, not social circle, but it is related to big and small cities. Basically, I'm talking about like big cities like New York and LA, maybe Miami to a certain extent, Vegas perhaps. That's, Vegas not the biggest city, but for clubbing. And then like smaller cities, like say you do a city like a Nashville or an Austin or maybe Orlando, something like that. Denver maybe. The difference there can be access. A lot of times in these cities like New York, LA, Miami, Vegas, there's an access issue. Like a lot of the game will relate to getting into the right club, meeting the right type of girls, etc. And so that becomes an issue. And so there is this sort of status associated with certain clubs, and that is a part of the game. Whereas in these smaller cities, you don't have that issue because everybody can pretty much get into whatever club. And so the clubs themselves might not be as good as the super high-end clubs, but in general, actually, you might find hotter girls in the normal average clubs in the smaller cities because there's not that drain of the hottest girls going to like the mega clubs or going to the hot, like posh Velvet Rope club that you have trouble getting into. And so that can be a difference. Also, when you're in those more exclusive clubs, there's an inherent perception that you have value already, so you don't have to game quite as hard. Whereas if you're in a normal club, you're just the next guy off the street, so you have to start from scratch. So that's kind of the difference. One is it's harder to get the access, but once you have the access, it's a little easier. The other one, you have availability of a lot of girls. And then in the small towns, there won't be quite as many like tens because there's not as much reason for like hot hired guns or models to go there. But there'll be plenty of hot girls, and you'll do just fine. So that's kind of big town versus small town, and also social circle versus cold approach. Next question, long sets versus short sets. This is a really interesting question because I don't think there is a right answer to it. I think that it depends on what you personally want and what you're personally working on in your game. So the two philosophies are this. One is go into a set, stay as long as you can, try and make it work, and put everything you can into running it properly. The idea being that you need to run a really good set to get laid, so you may as well try and run really good sets. And the bonuses of this is, number one, you learn to endure. You learn to push through a lot of stuff. You learn to deal with whatever obstacles come your way, and you learn to be very persistent. Also, a nice plus of this is that generally if you're doing this, you're going to select hot girls. So when you do succeed, you're going to succeed with very hot girls. Whereas if you're bouncing around and just taking kind of what happens to go with you, a lot of times you won't end up with quite as hot of a girl. The bonus to bouncing around, though, is that you're knocking on a lot of doors, basically. Like a general rule of sales, the more doors you knock on, the more yeses you get, right? And then also, you're giving yourself a higher percentage of running into those girls that are down. Like the theory here being that there are certain girls that are just not going to fuck tonight, and there are certain girls that are. And so if you bounce around and talk to enough girls, you're more likely to fall upon the literally fall upon the girls who are more likely to be down that night, or more likely to go home with you that night. So you're upping your percentages in that way. So the idea there being that attraction is sort of an instantaneous thing that occurs. It's either on or it's off within a few minutes at the very least. And then that's going to determine things from there. Now, I think that if you want to get laid the highest percentage of nights, I think that you should bounce around a bit, especially early in the night. I think that you will not only be more likely to find the girl that's down, you'll also tend to build momentum. You'll tend to build this phenomenon of momentum, which is you're talking to a lot of people, it gets easier and easier, and your sets get better and better throughout the night. And so I think that's a very good procedure overall for making that happen. However, I do think that there is a lot to be learned from doing the longer sets, doing the find the hot girl, stick in, and make it go all night. And the lessons there are, number one, persistence. Number one, the ability to persist through anything, and the ability to deal with whatever comes up is very, very important, especially if in the long run what you look for is a very, very high quality, not a quantity sort of a thing. The other thing that I think is really, really good about doing the one-shot, one-kill type of approach or the longer sets is that you force yourself to game out of state. You force yourself to not be able to rely on state for game. You force yourself to not ever make state an excuse. And I think that's a problem a lot of guys run into, is that they do make state an excuse. They do think that if they're not out of state, they can't game, or they have to feel great to game, or whatever, and that's not the case. I said this in one of my speeches recently, but game is pretty much the only area in life where you can use state as an excuse. It's not like you can go into work and tell your boss, hey, boss, I can't do any work today, I'm not in state. Because it's bullshit. Nobody will accept that. And also realize that there's a certain thing called skill and experience, which can trump state as well. Like if I were to play basketball against Michael Jordan, doesn't matter how in state I am or how out of state he is, he's going to fucking crush me because he just has that skill and experience level. And so to a certain extent, if you learn to game out of state, if you learn to be able to do it in whatever your headspace is, you're learning skill, you're learning experience, you're building more bricks in that particular wall. And that way you can do it no matter where you are, no matter what your situation. And I think that's what real game is. I mean, getting in state is nice, getting in state is fun, but to me, and to me, it's very valuable. And you can say that good game is what you're capable of at your absolute best, what you're capable of when you do hit that godlike state. But at the same time, you could also say, you could define your game by how are you at your worst. When you are shit, when nothing's going your way at all, can you still pull it together? Can you still get a super hot girl? Because if you can do that, then you really have game. And I think that's a very useful skill for many, many reasons. Among them, the fact that within a relationship, you're not going to be able to be in state all the time either. And on a day two, you're not going to be able to be in state all the time either. So you need to be able to pull that together. So I think there is value in both, and it really depends what you're looking for. Are you looking to get laid the highest percentage of sets or the highest percentage of nights? And are you looking to learn game in a technical sense, or are you looking to get that mindset? And so I think actually for guys, in their learning process, they should do both. You should take certain nights and bounce around and play a numbers game, and then certain nights you should actually zone in and try and find that one hot set. So I actually do encourage both, and those are the pros and the cons of each.